What's up, guys? We are back with Scummy Unplugged. And first of all, I just want to say thank you guys. I've been getting a lot of feedback from you guys, so I think we're going to keep this Scummy Unplugged thing going. And without further ado, we have our next guest. His name is Kenny Watson. For a lot of motocross guys out there, I really don't have to let you guys know who he is. For people that don't know who he is, he's going to let you know all this. But I would like to say he's a brand builder. We're not going to cut that out. We're going with it. Brand builder. He started so many successful motocross teams. He's a originator. I could go on. I don't know the correct way of saying everything you've done, but how would you introduce yourself to the people that don't ride motocross and people that don't already know who you are?
I think you described it pretty well. My objective, it was always to build brands. And it didn't start out like that. When I tell my story, you'll understand where I come from. But today, my object in life is to build brands, and my number one priority is to stay sober. So I know if I do that, I have a chance to take over the world.
I think we'll get into the whole sober talk. Of course, that's why we're here, but let's get into the first stages of Kenny Watson. And I know with you, it's how I got introduced with you through motocross, but what started out in your life of being the motocross guy and the brand builder you are? How was the early stages of your life? I don't know if you want to jump into
I'd like to start at the beginning where it all happened. I was raised, my father was a heroin addict. My mom and dad are from New York City, and my dad was a very problemed heroin addict child in New York City. When he was 16 years old, he was facing a lot of time in prison or jail, youth authority. And my mom was that sweet little girl that fell in love with the bad boy, like it always happens. My mom got pregnant with me at a super young age, and my dad was sent away. My dad went to a place in Santa Monica called Synanon. Synanon said back in the day that they were a recovery house center, but a lot of people don't.
Recovery center? Synanon?
Well, they said it was. That's what it was supposed to be. People don't know what it is. Google it, look it. There's been books written about it. There's been movies about it. But Synanon, it ended up to be, they call it a cult. They're saying, I was born there. I lived there until I was 11 years old. So
you were born there, so you're saying a cult. I mean, families can go there and live there?
Yes.
I've never heard of it.
Yes,
so.
You can go there. What it is, it's a recovery, and it was, matter of fact, I was talking to my mom about it last night, and I'm like, and she wanted to argue with me and saying anybody can walk off the streets and go there. But the way they worked was they had a tax exemption from the IRS, so they never had to pay taxes.
Okay.
So it was, I don't want to call it a nonprofit, but you know, when people came in, their families would donate stuff. They would give them money, give them cars, give them stuff. So these people had all this stuff, and they were accumulating all this stuff, and they would go out on these trips, you know, and go to dairy farmers, cattle farmers, you know, people, and say, hey, this is what we're doing. We're helping out drug addicts. Do you want to donate stuff to help us live? Gas, trucks, cars. So that's how it all started. And I think it started in like 1958.
Wow.
And it went till 1991. We were there, and I was there until I was almost 11.
So your parents lived there, you were born there. Did they not have a house?
Well, what it was there was a place called Synanon. Their main facility was on Ocean Park in Pico in Santa Monica. And if you go there, I think it's a hotel now. It's like Club Del Mar or Club Del something.
Yeah.
And it's right on the corner of Ocean Park and Pico. So they had a huge building that people lived in, but right across the street they owned a huge apartment complex, what they called the Caves. And a lot of people lived in these apartments, and that's where my mom and dad lived. But it was really weird because they had this concept that they didn't want you to stay with your family. They wanted kids to see what it was like to live with other families.
What?
So my parents would say, hey, here, take to another family for 3 or 4 months. They would give them their kids, and it whirlwind. And I grew up there, not knowing anything better than being a kid.
Yeah.
So, getting a little bit older, I used to go visit my grandparents in New York.
Getting a little older, I don't want to get off this topic. How did you guys get out of that place?
Okay, let me get there.
Okay.
So I was getting a little bit older, and I would go to my grandparents in New York, and I was going to summer camp with normal kids that New York City, in the, early 70s, was like learning how to cuss, learning how to, fight, learning how to be just a normal kid.
Yeah.
And when you were in Synanon, you had shaved head, overalls, everyone dressed the same. You had to say yes, sir, to everybody, no, sir. And it was like a strict deal. You couldn't cuss. So I went back there and I learned how to do all the things you're not supposed to do. Exactly. So I came back a couple times, and then I went to a liquor store and I got caught stealing. I was cussing. So what they did was they had a thing called boot camp for all the older kids, 15, 16, 17 years old, that it was up in Tamales Bay, up by Walnut Creek, up in the Bay Area. And they didn't tell my parents at the time. In the middle of the night, they came and they pretty much grabbed me and threw me on this bus with a bunch of other kids. And I didn't know what was going on. I thought we were going on a field trip or doing something. Yeah. And we got up there, and it was on. It was a boot camp. Literally violated me in multiple ways, beat me up. I was waking up, and you said, "What time do you go to bed?" That's what I told you in my story. I would get up every morning at 4:30 to, if I wasn't up, a grown man would be standing over me, slapping me in the face or punching me. So to this day, I'm to that guy like, I don't like getting up. I want to get up when I want to get up. It's been that way ever since.
Yeah.
So they used to stand over me and have you yet? There was no schooling there. There was no schooling. There was no education. Like, I didn't start school until we left.
If your parents got caught being high there, would they kick your whole family out? How does that process work?
No, they wouldn't. So what they would do, if you went out and you got loaded or you used dope when you were in there, they would put you in a separate section and you would start all over again, where, let's say, they had different levels of where you could be. Okay. Let's say that you'd go out and you would hustle and bring back money and do whatever. And if you were at that position and you were out doing that and you got loaded and you came back and they knew you got loaded, they would put you back to working in the kitchen.
Wow.
So like that. So it was crazy.
Were your parents sober in that process living there?
Well, the thing is, they didn't really have, my mom was never a user or a junkie. My dad was a full heroin addict, and my dad was clean. He didn't use the whole time he was there. My dad learned a trade. He became a carpenter, and he was building houses for this place. But what happened was, when I was there, they weren't telling my parents what was going on. They just said I was up there, living up there, because they didn't know, because I was always all over the place.
Didn't tell you.
So they thought I was fine, and they would literally stand over me at 10 years old and make me write a letter, and I couldn't even write. My mom broke them out last night. I love it here. I mean, they would trace it, and I would have to write over it. I love it here. I never want to leave. This is the best experience. Wow. And they would hit me over the knuckles with rulers. Like, it was bad. Like, they would make me get up at 4 or 5 in the morning and run 5 miles. If I stopped, I would go, "I got asthma, I can't run." There'd be like some jarhead looking guy just kicking me hard as he could in the ass. "Get going."
That's
well,
crazy.
Finally, my mom and dad found out what was going on. And I remember clearly, like it was yesterday, my dad tapping me on the shoulder in the middle of the night, and I woke up and I started crying, saying, he's like, "We're leaving." They call it splitting. And I woke up just crying, going, "Don't leave me here, don't leave me here." Yeah. And he goes, "We're not." My dad scooped me up and we left, and we moved to Culver City.
Okay.
My mom and dad, my grandma helped my dad out, because they left with nothing. They left with their clothes on their back. My mom and dad got in a little apartment in Culver City, and have you yet, I had to go, I was in 4th grade, or 3rd grade, and I never went to school. We're talking, 1977, I showed up to school with a shaved head, overalls, and that's the year when everyone had long hair. I didn't fit in right away.
Yeah.
I was made fun of. I was this, all these bad things were happening to me. So I just worked my way through it. I was always behind in school, and I was building resentment right away towards my parents. Like, this isn't fair. I was starting to talk to other kids. I see how other kids are growing up, and it just...
You wanted their lifestyle.
Yeah, exactly. And then, my dad started using again.
Oh, man.
My dad started shooting heroin again. My mom didn't have a high school education. She didn't have a driver's license. She didn't have anything. And it was just me and my mom. And I remember sleeping and my mom crying, just hysterically crying. And I remember walking out there, I was probably 12 or 13, and just hugging my mom and telling her it's going to be okay. She was like, "You're such a brave little boy." And I said, yeah, my dad would come home and, he would physically violate me and beat me up and beat my mom up, and the cops would come and my dad would take off. And it was just a bad scene for a long time.
You had a rough up.
Totally. And I don't really share this with a lot of people,
I never knew this. And I think at the end of this story, I think I'm going to look back and be like, you can have a jacked up childhood, whatever, but you can get over that with as strong and everything that you've accomplished in your life to get over this that I've never known. I mean, so let's fast forward a little bit, your teenage years. Is that when you started to rebel, or, is that?
No, what happened was when I was a teenager, I was really, like I said, I was a latchkey kid. My mom finally started working in the medical field. She got a job, she got her driver's license, and she started to go, and it was me and my mom. It was always just me and my mom. And
your dad split?
My dad was out doing his thing, using, and so it was me and my mom, and I needed a release. I didn't know what it was, so I really became into sports, and I really didn't have that many friends, and I was really a loner as a kid.
Yeah.
But I never had any brothers or sisters, so what I had was that camaraderie of baseball, a team, and I really liked that. Working with others and having a team and learning how to do teamwork and all that stuff.
Feeling that you were a part of something.
Exactly. And I became really good at baseball. We ended up moving out to the Valley when I was about 14. And my mom and dad were on and off, and they were on, and my dad bought a house. We moved out there. They were together for a little bit, and things went haywire. My mom said, "Nope, you're done," clipped them, and it was me and my mom again. So growing up, I started to meet new friends in the Valley. Once again, I was behind in school. I didn't feel, so I was always like, what could I do to fit in?
Yeah.
And that's when I started to smoke pot. And I always told myself, I'm not going to be a drug addict. My dad was a drug addict. I'm never going to be like him, because at a young age, I used to find my dad passed out with rigs in his arm, and I was just like, I'm never going to be like that man. I'm never going to be like my dad. Still to this day, like, he has some good qualities. We don't have the best relationship, but I don't want to be like him in any way. I have a daughter, and he's seen her twice.
It's crazy how powerful drugs are. Like, you grew up and you saw that, and then you kind of ended up down that road a little bit. We'll get into that. It's just, I'm just saying that just how crazy drugs are, man. How they just take over your life and everything you've been through. You would think you would be so far away from that, but how powerful drugs are. They grabbed you and they sucked you right into that lifestyle, down the stories.
Yeah, it was, the whole thing happened was growing up, I started to hang out with the party crowd, but I still played baseball, and I was still really active and pretty good at baseball. And I started to decline on just practicing, and I still had that natural talent where I was good enough to make it by and make All-Stars and play in high school. And I had an opportunity to go do some other things after high school, and I did cocaine for the first time. And within 2 months of doing cocaine, I was smoking it and twirling the pipe. And I always justified it in my head is I'm not a drug addict because I'm not putting a needle in my arm.
Of course, man. Right?
It's the sickness of the disease.
Exactly.
And I went to rehab when I was 19.
You did coke at what age?
17.
19, so 2-3 years going pretty heavy?
Yeah, really
hard.
Heavy.
Okay. You landed in rehab because I'm sure you didn't want to go.
No, what happened was I had an opportunity to go do some stuff with baseball, and the drugs got in my way. And it was to the point where I had to come home and go to work for my dad in his construction company. or do this. And I decided that I didn't want to work, and I just didn't have that mentality to work construction.
Yeah.
And I went, and it was crazy because I remember the first time I went to the care unit in Anaheim, and I remember going there, and they were telling me that I was an alcoholic.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, you have to identify as an alcoholic, and
Yeah.
I would fight it to say I'm not an alcoholic.
Yeah.
I didn't drink. You know, I did coke. You know, and they're just like, you know, trying to, and I fought it and fought it and fought it until I had a counselor that really made it obvious to me that I was an alcoholic, and said, if there wasn't blow around and there wasn't weed around, what would you do to alter your mind?
You're an
And
addict.
I would drink.
Yeah.
And how much would you drink one beer? And I'm like, no. You know, so I realized what the problem was, so I started identifying as an alcoholic. To speed it up a little bit, I stayed sober for 13 years.
I was just going to say, like, I feel that 90% of people that kind of get pushed to rehab, they're going to come out and stay sober for a couple weeks
Well,
and go
what
back
happened
out, but
was
you made it stick. That's
I got
kind of
I got sober at a young age, and like I said, going back to feeling part of, going to meetings and
felt part of
having
something.
people come up to me and open arms and, you know, telling me that they love me and we can do this together, and, you know, like, how to sponsor working steps. And but at that time I was working steps and going through, you know, I was faking it. You know what I mean? I was going through and I wasn't doing a thorough inventory. I wasn't really letting loose and getting rid of a lot of the issues I had in my life with, you know, with my dad and growing up. And I really was just like, okay, I don't need to talk about that. So I stayed sober.
But 13 years is still something big. So those
Yeah.
meetings do help, and to tell other
Exactly.
people, like, they
I
help.
was going. It was a cool thing. I would, you know, I was talking to Greg earlier. I would go to the Rodeo meeting in Beverly Hills, you know, wear the dress, you know, dress up. And for me, getting sober was I would pick out the dude in the room that had the hottest chick, the nicest car, and that was dressed the best. And I go, I want what he has.
Yeah.
And that was what I thought recovery was about accumulating stuff. And I realized once I went out, that's not the case.
Yeah.
We'll speed it up. I had some surgery, my wisdom teeth pulled, and I remember what it felt like, you know, to have that mind-altering deal being on pills, and then that always stuck in my head. And speed it up, I moved when I started working for Carrie Hart. I moved to Vegas, and I would dabble in pills. I stopped going to meetings. I was a motocross mechanic at the time, and, you know, to go backwards a little bit.
I feel let's just stick with this. We'll get back into motocross. We
Okay.
just bypass this. 13 years sober, you get your wisdom teeth pulled.
Yeah, so I felt that feeling that we feel as addicts, like, oh my God, that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
And meetings, sobriety, recovery, friends in the program, steps, all that went out the window, because that feeling that I had was like, oh my God. So after I did that a few times, I stopped going to meetings because I felt like
You had it.
I went out. And I was like ashamed. I didn't want to go back. I said I fucked up. I had so much time and I lost it. And I was like, I'm done.
Because you got your wisdom teeth and you got prescribed. Mm-hmm. But if you take what you're prescribed, really,
Yeah, but when you're
obviously you went way bigger.
Exactly.
Okay,
It
we
started
didn't get
out, you're
that
supposed
part.
to eat one every 4 hours. I was eating, you know, after the first time I ate them, I was like, oh my God, if I eat one and I feel like this, if I eat three, I'm going to really feel good.
Feel way
And
better.
That's where it went. And after a while, I found myself, you know, buying them off the street, doing it, and I just said, I got to stop, and I did stop. So I ended up going to work for Carrie Hart, and moved to Las Vegas, and became partners with him, and we started.
And Carrie Hart in the motocross world, biggest guy. We'll kind of get back. He's married to Pink. He was.
So what happened was I went there, and I wasn't going to meetings though, and one thing led to the next, where he owned a nightclub in Vegas, He had a tattoo shop inside the Hard Rock and a nightclub, and he was moving back to Malibu with his wife. And he said, hey, I need you to keep an eye on everything for me and be my eyes and ears. And so one thing led to the next, and I was going to the nightclub 3 or 4 nights a week, and he had free, I had the run of the place, free bottles, free drinks, walk through the line. The line was, a couple hundred people deep, and I would just pick out a couple girls that I wanted to hang out with and, get them drunk and not drink. And then one night, I just said, you know what, screw it. And as soon as that alcohol hit my lips, it was over.
Yeah.
I was out running. I remember one night I started doing blow again a little bit, and it wasn't the same. Like, I loved the way it made me feel, and I was just a happy guy, but the come down was just so gnarly for me. And they had a unisex bathroom where girls and guys could share the bathroom. Mm-hmm. And I was super tight with the door guys and the security guys, and I remember one night I went there, and they knew what I was doing. And, I would give the door guys $100 and said, hey, watch my back and make sure there's no security, cops, undercovers in there, because they would come in there. And one night they said, hey, be cool, there's some undercover cops in here. And I'm like, all right. And I went into the bathroom, and the door guy was there, and he's like, yeah, you're safe, you're all good. And I go in there, and I get done with it, and then all of a sudden he bangs on the door. He's like, yo, yo, yo. So I put everything away, and I come out, and next thing I know, they have Bruno Mars all hemmed up, and they arrested him for doing blow in the bathroom.
Bruno Mars?
Yeah.
What?
And he came out, screaming and yelling, and you know who I am, and crying, and they freaking took him through the back door, and I was like, is that a wake-up call? Like, that could have been me.
Yeah.
But it didn't stop me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I was like, man. So I ended up meeting a girl that I knew through a friend of Carrie's, in 2011, and started dating her and got her pregnant. And she was from San Diego. Mm-hmm. Our business moved from Vegas to California, and I still lived in Vegas. I had a house, I had everything I needed, and I was commuting back and forth, and the baby was born, and I was still living that lifestyle where I really didn't give a shit about nobody.
Even when you have a baby and you're...
Yeah, and I wanted to... I told the mom, I said, we need to try to work this out for the kid before, because when she told me she was pregnant, I said, what do you want to do?
Yeah.
I said, I was raised by a woman, and I think you, as a woman, need to make that decision, and I will support whatever you want. And she goes, I don't believe in abortion. And I said, okay, but we need to go to counseling, get along, and if we're going to have this kid, we need to be together. And because I grew up without a dad, and I didn't want my daughter to grow up without a dad.
Yeah.
And she's like, I agree. Well, it really didn't work out because I went to California and I was being shady. I was talking to other girls. I was, doing phone sex with girls. I was getting videos from women. And I went away and I left my laptop and she found it. And my daughter was 6 months old at the time. And I just got a new house in Menifee, California. And I came back from a trip and all their shit was packed up. And she says, we're leaving. It's over. And once again, I was abandoned. I was by myself. And I was
Isn't that
scared.
weird how life is like, it was almost like your childhood.
Yeah.
Everything you didn't want to be, and now you're just right back at your dad's level.
Exactly. And I felt so abandoned and so alone and so ashamed. I didn't know what to do, but I started to feel...
Were you blaming them or yourself at that point?
I wasn't blaming... I was blaming her because I didn't really blame and say, oh, no, it's your fault or my fault. I was just in that predicament for myself and in my head that I just didn't want to feel the pain.
Yeah.
I didn't want to feel... So I went back to what can take this away from me and just make me numb.
Pills. Opiates.
So I went back to pills, and the pills were a really gnarly thing for me. It got really bad because I didn't know what to do at the time. My daughter left, The mom knew that I was starting to take pills at the time, and there's no way in hell she was going to let me see my kid. And I decided, I had a girlfriend at the time that pretty much came in and brought me back to where I needed to be and pretty much saved me. I kicked it by myself, didn't go to meetings, and was solid. Got my daughter back in my life. And then without meetings, without a support group, I started to hear these voices in my head about, you're just like your dad. You don't know how to be a dad. You don't know how to live life without, chemicals in your system. And it all started up again in my head. It just started to go woo woo. And about 3 years after the whole situation, I hit a depression that was so gnarly, and I was suicidal.
Is this when we had that talk at that time in your life?
Yes.
We'll get into that.
That was about 16 months ago, where I came to a conclusion that I didn't want to feel no more. I didn't want to live no more. And I went back and I was, using pills up to about 16 months ago, again, pretty heavily. And depression was more of anything. I wouldn't say that I was taking pills more than I was depressed. I was living in my own shit where I just didn't want to feel. And I really believe if I did not have a daughter, I probably would have killed myself.
Yeah, it was that bad.
I probably would have, at the end.
Were you seeing your daughter at all?
What's that?
Were you seeing your daughter?
Yeah, I was seeing her, but it wasn't as regular as I liked it because she lived in San Diego at the time.
Yeah.
So, I would lie to the mom and say, "Oh, I'm all good." But meanwhile, I would try not to take pills when I picked up my daughter and drove and all this stuff. But I just got to the point where I just couldn't take it anymore. So I started taking, medicine and pills and all this crap for depression and mixing, Xanax and Vicodin and doing all this crap. So one day I just said, you know what? I can't live my life like this. I cannot live my life like this any longer. And I surrendered. I said, I'm done. And that's when I called you.
No, it's heavy. You called me crying, and I've never heard you. You kept it so inside because at this time, and we're not going to talk about the motocross side. That's going to be in the article. So this is just about this. You called me, and with all that, you guys have just won a 450 championship. And this will be all in the article, but in what you did for your career, that's the pinnacle. That's the top. So on the outside, people are looking at you. You got a house, you got a daughter, you are a team manager for a world famous championship team. And then I'm getting a call where you're crying saying like, dude, I want to die. Like I want to change around. It's just crazy. Like addiction, like you don't see it from the outside, how you're really hurting. And so let's go on with that call. The crazy thing was
like, I have a podcast that I do too. And like I was talking to people on my podcast about recovery. And I was fucking loaded, and like at the time I thought I was getting by, and I go back and I listen to some of those podcasts and my voice I sound like shit. And I'm like, what the, but I had to surrender. I called you and you told me what I needed to do. So I knew that I needed treatment. Yeah. I knew that I couldn't do this on my own. And I reached out to a really good friend of mine that lives in Lake Havasu, and he knew some people up there. I didn't have any insurance at the time. I was just at a rock bottom, and this family took me in and took me to an outpatient program. I got linked in with going to meetings right away. I seen a psychologist to work on my depression. I got set up, on some medication for my depression, and I was seeing him. So for 6 weeks, I just dug my feet in, and that's what I did. And when I came back home, first thing first, I found a group. And I never went to men's meetings before, ever during my sobriety, because I always thought like I wanted to be where the girls were. I wanted to be where the cool people were. So I was at a meeting and a gentleman sat next to me and he's like, hey, there's a really good men's meeting on Thursday night. You need to go check it out. And the first day I went to that meeting, man, we were saying the Serenity Prayer, and this meeting's pretty hardcore. You got to take your hat off when you go into the meeting. It's a really heavy, straight up deal where these men show you this unconditional love no matter what. And I remember when we were saying the Lord's Prayer, and there were 75 men holding hands saying the Lord's Prayer, and the energy that I just got through that, just brought me to tears, man. And
it wasn't about the girls anymore. I think this time it was about you really wanted to change your life. It was
and the number one thing in my life today is recovery and sobriety. I know if I am sober, and I know if I work my program and I do what I need to do, I have a chance. I know, like for instance, today as I sit, all that great stuff that came into my life with, working for Carey Hart, owning part of the team, managing, winning championships, having all this cool stuff, the job went away in sobriety. The team went away. My relationships went away. But my sobriety, I got. And I know if I stay sober and I work my steps and I'm honest with myself and I work with others, that's my key. I love to give back. Like I had plans Thanksgiving, go to Glamis, go, drive the Razor, go hang out. No, I decided that I'm staying home and I'm going to go to the Salvation Army and I'm going to feed some homeless people that have nowhere to go and they have no family. Because I know what it's like to be alone. Mm-hmm. So I want to go back and give back to people that have nothing and try. So today what I'm doing is I don't have that great job. I'm trying to build a new life. And I know that it's possible. I know that anything's possible if I just try and just give it and turn it over to my higher power.
In recovery, that's huge to give back. I think that really keeps you humble and it keeps you hungry. And for me and for you, giving back is really number one. I think that just really...
I think an important thing that happened to me was, when I, got sober this time, was with my daughter. I know I keep talking about my daughter, but I really found out that a lot of the resentment and a lot of fear I had was not be able to be a good father, and not be a stand-up father and a productive human being in life. And after I was sober about 6 months, my kid's mom, who I have an unbelievable relationship with today. She's remarried, she has another son. I go there 2 to 3 times a week and eat dinner. We're like a family. I hang out. Matter of fact, I took him to the premiere the other night, and he's a friend of mine. I couldn't ask for a better stepfather for my daughter to have. I have no resentment towards him. He loves that little girl unconditionally. And, she calls him dad. And at first it was bothering me, like, oh my God. But you know what? She said something to me. This little girl's 5 years old, and she goes, Dad, you know what? I'm so special. I have 2 dads. And I'm just like, wow, that's heavy. That is so heavy. But getting back, she lived in San Diego, and her new husband works in the elevators union. And she calls and says, hey, we might have to move to Vegas because there's some work out there that Jared might need to go do for a year. And I was like, oh man, like, I'm not, my kid and, working on this relationship. And I was like really upset. 2 days later, she calls and she goes, you know what? Jared got another job and we're moving to Menifee. I got a house, it's literally half a mile from yours. And I was like, this is not a coincidence.
Sobriety.
This is the promises that everything happens for a reason and everything works itself out.
But people in recovery, they want that, but you really got to work the steps and you got to really make it. You can't, fake it. And these kind of miracles happen every time.
Yeah, well, people think if they get sober and they're just sober, that great things are going to happen in their life. No, you have to work. You can't expect them to happen.
They just
but
happen.
If you're just sitting on your couch every day and just saying, oh, I'm not using today, and I go to a meeting and you don't do anything, unless you give away what you were freely given, you're not going to get those promises back. You're not going to get anything in return. And it was crazy when I got my new sponsor this time around. I was asked to go on a panel, and I had like maybe 4 or 5 months, and I'm just like, why would I go on a panel? Like, I don't have no time. And he goes, what are you talking about? You got wisdom. You had 13, you know how to work this program. You know what to do. And since that day, I've been really active in trying to work with newcomers and do a lot of different stuff. And my life is blessed, man. I have no regrets. I don't have money. I don't have, property, prestige. I don't have any of that stuff. But I got sobriety, and I have an opportunity if I just keep doing what I'm doing. And I'm blessed. I'm so blessed.
Before we close out this interview, I want to get back to just a couple months ago, kind of just to show how deep and heavy addiction is when you made that phone call to me, you also made a phone call to our good friend, Brett. Mm-hmm. He got you in the right direction to go to that rehab. He helped you out hugely to get you back on track. And you knew him, we knew him forever. You knew him since you were little. Anyways, after he helped you, he fell down that same path, got back onto heroin, and he passed out in his truck and ran into a tree, and we had to go to the hospital and say goodbye to him when he was still alive. And the next day he passed out. He passed away, and he knew he was gonna pass away. And that was, I don't know what you want to say about that, but I just feel that was such a big deal in your life and my life, and it just happened. And how did that affect you? Because that was a very big deal. That was right, right when you were getting clean.
What Brett did was, I remember I called you. You were the first person I called, and you said, "Let me call Brett," because you were up here, I was down there, 100 miles away, and that dude came over to my house within 15 minutes, and I was crying, and he was hugging me and telling me, "It's going to be okay. You're going to be okay. I got you." And that dude freaking drove me to the train station, where I got on the train and took the train to Needles, where the guy picked me up. And I could have driven myself probably, or I could have got a ride, but I wanted to either take the Greyhound bus or take a train, where I had to sit there and think about what I got myself into.
Yeah.
And Brett was a crucial part of my recovery. And I knew when I got back, and I was like, "Hey, let's go to a meeting." And he was like, all right. And I would say, "All right, I'll meet you there, or I'll come pick you up." And he was always making excuses. He wasn't there. And I tried to talk to him, and I had an opportunity for him to go to a rehab, and he got arrested, and he was calling my friend that owned this rehab in Pennsylvania, and he was supposed to get out of jail and go right to the airport and get on a plane and go, but he had to sell his truck to pay for the rehab. And he was like, "I'm not selling my truck." I said, "Dude, it's materialistic. You can buy another truck." And he's like, "No, bullshit." Well, his mom already spent a couple $100,000 in rehabs and treatment, and she was like, I'm through. I can't do it. And so what happened was, he passed out at the wheel, like he said. He crashed. He ended up being paralyzed from his neck down. And he put his family and all his friends and loved ones through enough pain where he said, "I don't want to live like this." And he had a trach in his throat, and they pulled it out, and he told his mom that he just let him die.
That was heavy. We were there at the hospital,
and that was
saying that.
He's the bravest dude I know, just to personally, I don't know if I could do that, because I have a daughter. And I don't know if I would say, "You know what, I don't want to live," because, no matter what, I would still want to be there mentally for her. But he passed away. And I remember going there and was super upset the last time I talked to him. And he's like, "Why are you crying, dude? I told you I would go big."
On his deathbed.
He's like, "Dude, it's all good. I'm going to be with my dad." And I'm just like, "Dude, you're so strong, Brett.
Yeah.
Like, you're the strongest dude I know." And it was sad. I had to kiss him on the forehead and say goodbye. And I walked out of there very mad at this disease.
Yeah.
Very, very mad. And, I really hope that, we've been sharing this message about Brett. We did a podcast about it, me and Kevin, about, how this disease can kill you. and everyone says, oh, not me, not me, it never happened to me. Well, that hit home, and it could have been any of us.
It could have, man. I think what you're doing right now, I know Brett is looking down, and he's so proud of you. I am proud of you. I'm proud that we got to do this interview, and along with this interview, the article is going to really explain everything, who you are, and all your accomplishments. But I just want to say thank you for doing this interview, and I'm proud of you, man. How much time do you have right now?
Let's see. I got 16 months.
16 months, man. That's huge.
Yeah.
I guess we'll close it out on that, guys. If this man can do it and be here today, I think anybody can do it, you guys. Recovery and sobriety is a pretty badass lifestyle. You know, you can still do everything you want and just wake up like it's Christmas every day. And I say that a lot, but you know, it's really true. I wake up happy, and you know, you guys can have it too. When you're in addiction, you're inside your closed room thinking there's no way out. There is a way out. So, you know, look into treatment, look into AA meetings, NA meetings, whatever it is, you guys can have your life back. And I just want to thank you guys, and we'll close it out. Thank you.